From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast. I hope everyone's having a magnificent start to their week. Tuesday, June 11th, 2024. We've got a packed show today. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Nudge Security. You'll hear more from them later on in the show, but go check out nudgesecurity.com/CyberHub for all your latest SaaS security needs. Especially today, we're going to be talking a whole bunch around SaaS. So Nudge couldn't have been a partner to a better episode than this morning's. Let's go ahead and get the show going with a traditional CyberHub podcast kickoff. A coffee cup cheers. My double espresso, whatever you're drinking, put it in the comments. Let me know. Coffee cup cheers, y'all. Yep, coffee in the morning. Like, I don't know how people did it back in the day. All right, let's go ahead and get started with Snowflake. Mandiant now saying that 165 organizations were actually impacted by the incident at Snowflake, but the Snowflake incident wasn't actually Snowflake's fault. So Mandiant found no evidence to suggest that the way into Snowflake's customer environment was through Snowflake enterprise environment, but rather it was a massive Infostealer credential type of attack on specific customers within the Snowflake infrastructure. So according to the Mandiant report, these attacks started on April 14th. They targeted accounts that did not have the proper MFA protections in place. Some of the credentials used in the campaigns were compromised years ago, meaning reused passwords, reused credentials that were compromised 2, 3, 4 years ago that were never changed. And so that's how the threat actors got in. This is being attributed to UNC 5537, according to Microsoft, and they've been historical Infostealer infections, some of which date back to 2020. The credentials used in the campaign were stolen using malwares like Luma, Meta, Raccoon Stealer, Redline, Rispero, and Viter. In some instances, the contractor systems also used for personal activities were infected with the information stealer. In addition to lacking MFA and using long exposed credentials that had not been rotated, the compromised Snowflake instances also lacked network allow list. Approximately 80% of the accounts had prior credential exposures. UNC 5537 accessed the instances using the native web-based UI, the command line tool SnowSQL, an attacker named utility Rapeflake, tracked as Frostbite, which was used for the reconnaissance, and the database management utility DBeaver or DBeaver Ultimate for running queries. The threat actor was seen repeatedly executing SQL commands to perform reconnaissance and stage and exfiltrate data. They have targeted hundreds of organizations worldwide, which operate under various names on Telegram channels and cybercrime forum. The main individuals in North America with a member in Turkey. Some members are associated with other threat groups. UNC 5537's campaign against Snowflake customers' instances is not the result of any particularly novel or sophisticated tool, technique, or procedure. The campaign is the consequence of the growing Infostealer marketplace and missed opportunities to further secure credentials. Some of the victims that were previously named, Ticketmaster, obviously, Santander Bank, they've announced that Anheuser-Busch has not yet, Allstate has not, Advanced Auto Parts has, Mitsubishi has not, Neiman Marcus hasn't, Progressive hasn't, and State Farm hasn't either. All are victims of this specific campaign. Cylance, for their end, are confirming the legitimacy of data being sold on the hacking forum, stating it's old data compromised from a third-party platform. The threat actor known as Spider is selling the Cylance data for $750,000. The data allegedly includes a substantial amount of information, such as 34 million customer and employee emails and PII belonging to Cylance customers, partners, and employees. However, the leak samples appear to be old marketing data used by Cylance, and it could be why Cylance is just really outright dismissing it. So there's that. This does have some links to the Snowflake attacks, although one could argue that may not be the case here. The evidence isn't concrete, rather circumstantial at best. There's that there as well. The New York Times source code that were reported on yesterday, we're getting a lot more insights into exactly what is in the 270 gigabytes of internal New York Times data. Other than the source code, there's also source code for the popular Wordle game and other parts of the business. All in all, the 5,000 GitHub repos, mostly unencrypted, contained a collective of 3.6 million files. Some of this is also includes the New York Times education site users with name, emails, and hashed passwords, internal Slack communications, and authentication details like URLs and the respective passwords, secret keys, and API tokens. Those are going to require immediate attention from the Times security team. The underlying event related to the recent online posting of the Times information occurred in January of 2024 when a credential to a cloud-based third-party code platform was inadvertently made available, according to Charlie Stadelander from New York Times Managing Director for External Communication Newsroom and Opinion. The issue was quickly identified. They took appropriate measures in response. At the time, there's no indication that of unauthorized access to time zone systems nor impact to our operations related to this event. But this has significant implications, right? I mean, you could think of what would essentially be here in an election year, in a time where there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation. We saw what happened in Europe over the weekend with DDoS attacks. Imagine if they can plant a October surprise through a cyber attack at the Times. That would have significant impact, right? So the New York Times shouldn't dismiss this, shouldn't be lazy about it, and everyone else should be really monitoring this effectively in order to ensure two things here. One, you're rotating your username and passwords. If you haven't learned that from Snowflake, you do now. Number two, that you got visibility into everything you're doing, into all of your environments, including GitHub. If you're not managing that, you're setting yourself up for quite a challenge. And now, folks, since we're talking SaaS, let's hear from our friends over at Nudge Security.
When your CEO asks, hey, are we using that SaaS app that was just breached? How quickly and confidently can you answer? Due to the sprawling nature of SaaS app adoption, it's hard to know who is using what and to understand the implications when a popular SaaS app is breached. To solve this, Nudge Security discovers and categorizes every account for every SaaS app ever created by anyone in your organization. And a full inventory of all SaaS accounts is available within minutes of starting a free trial. Not only will you know who's using what, but you can automate communications out to end users, called nudges of course, that remind them to enable MFA, shut down unused accounts, enroll apps in SSO, etc. And Nudge Security will notify you of breaches impacting your SaaS provider so you can take immediate action to mitigate the impact. Start a 14-day trial now at nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub.
So again, nudgesecurity.com/cyberhub. Get your 14-day trial there and get insights into what's going on in your SaaS environment. Lord knows you need it, especially with everything else going on. Privacy authorities in Canada and the UK have launched a joint investigation to assess the scope of the sensitive customer information exposed in last year's 23andme data breach. The Privacy Commissioner of Canada and the Information Commissioner's Office will also look into whether the company had adequate safeguards to secure customer data stored in its system. This is a joint investigation by Canada and the UK, essentially together, in order to investigate the severity of this, worried about the genetic information and the potential data that could be used around it. All in all, 23andme for their end are saying, hey, this wasn't us. They stole customer logins and accessed it that way. Again, we'll see if that claim holds up in this investigation. It'll be interesting to see that. So we'll keep our eyes appraised into this situation. Now to some vulnerabilities. Today's Patch Tuesday, so tomorrow we'll have a show dedicated to nothing but Patch Tuesday stuff, but some stuff that's come out today that you should get your hands on. British semiconductor giant ARM has warned customers about a memory safety bug in the Mali GPU kernel drivers that's being exploited in the wild. CVE 2024-4610 is described as a use after free issue that could be exploited by local users to make improper GPU memory processing operations. Successful exploitation of the flaw allows a non-privileged attacker to access previously freed memory. According to the advisory, ARM is aware of the reports of this vulnerability being exploited in the wild at this time. According to ARM, CVE 2024-4610 impacts the Bifrost and the Valhalla GPU kernel drivers. The bug was introduced in driver versions R34P0 and was addressed with the release of R41P0 as well. That's back in November of 2022. Not everyone patched this up, so you want to make sure you get this taken care of ASAP. The Veeam Backup Enterprise Manager authentication bypass flaw we talked about a month ago, just about. CVE 2024-29849 is now publicly made available, making it urgent to apply the latest security updates. The Veeam Backup Enterprise Manager is a web-based platform for managing backups and replication installation via web console. It helps control backup jobs and perform restoration operations across an organization's backup infrastructure and large-scale deployment. In a technical write-up by Sina Karaki, the cybersecurity, and I'm really sorry for butchering your last name, Sina, like really apologizing here. She explains that the flaw lies in the veeam.backup.enterprise.rest API service.exe, which listens to TCP port 93908 functioning as a REST API server for the main web application. The exploit involves sending a specially crafted VMware single sign-on token to the vulnerable service using the Veeam API. The token contains an authentication request that impersonates an admin user and an SSO service URL that Veeam crucially does not verify, but rather just trusts. The base 64 encoded SSO token is decoded and interpreted in XML form to verify its validity via a SOAP request to an attacker-controlled URL. The rogue server set up by the attacker responds positively to validation requests, so Veeam accepts the authentication request and gives admin access to the attacker. So those unable to patch should limit access to the VBEM web interface by restricting network access to only trusted IP addresses, implement firewall rules to block unauthorized access to the ports used by Veeam services like 903, or 8, enable MFA for all accounts, deploy a web application firewall to help detect and block malicious requests targeting it. Again, firewall rules on the network side, web application firewall on the web side. Both are crucially important here. Regularly monitor and audit access logs for any suspicious or unauthorized access attempts and set up alerts for login attempts from untrusted IPs, and then isolate the server from other critical systems within your network. All in all, lots of work there. SAP also announced the release of 10 new and 2 updated security notes as part of its Security Patch Tuesday. SAP's new set of patches include 2 high-priority security notes, the most severe of which addresses a cross-site scripting bug in financial consolidation. According to application security firm OneOpsys, the security note addressed 2 key cross-site flaws in SAP's products collectively tracked under 1 CVE 2024-37177. The most critical one allows data to enter a web application through an untrusted source and manipulating website content. This causes a high impact on confidentiality and integrity of the application. So you want to make sure you get that addressed as well. The American Privacy Rights Act, that is sort of given some hope to some sort of comprehensive data privacy legislation that hopefully can be enacted and passed through both chambers of the House before the November elections, is facing the knife with a whole bunch of lobbyists and different organizations coming to kind of rip some of the stuff of the privacy bill, one of which is rightful so. The current bill in its current framework doesn't preempt state laws, meaning it's just adding an additional reporting factor, which is a problem. And I can tell you that that is something that's a problem with data breach notification, and that's also a problem with federal data privacy. If it either has got to be federal and then have some sort of state purview to it, or otherwise you're just adding more on the companies, and then at that point that just doesn't help at all, and then this law really will have no teeth. Data broker language is also a bit weak on here, with a lot of people talking about the fact that data brokers need to be kind of brought under control. So all in all, we'll see how that bill kind of does here in the next few days. We'll see if they can get it done. And finally, in M&A news, as our industry continues to consolidate. Fortinet has now announced plans to acquire Lacework, a late-stage cloud security startup that was once listed as a unicorn company valued north of $1 billion. Lacework's obviously had its challenges. It's had a whole bunch of layoffs. Fortinet now coming in to acquire the company, what seems to be might have been a bargain price. So more consolidation in our industry lets you everything you need to know about the economy. When markets consolidate, means the money isn't flowing to these companies, and it's easier to sell than it is to raise another serious. It also means that customer churn in cyber just doesn't exist. And again, it's mostly to do with the economy. It's also a lot to do with how well security companies have really transitioned to become security partners rather than vendors. And the ones that do this correctly have very, very low churn. And if you have very low churn, then you consolidate. That's what's happening here. That's it for our show this morning. We'll be back tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern, live with all the latest and greatest. Please make sure to subscribe, check out our friends at Nudge Security, and most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.